The epilogue starts with Reyna, Artanis and Selenis waiting for Kerrigan to contact them, even though she called them from Ulnar and should have been aware they have arrived. Kerrigan then appears, having boarded this ship without anyone noticing, and explains that Amon is alive in the void and an unknown voice is calling to her. Also, Amon is somehow going to return. Thus, Kerrigan proposes destroying Amon via a gate into the void she has somehow discovered. Then the humans, orcs and night elves ally against Archimonde. The Terrans, Zerg and Protoss ally against Amon, and enter the portal. Into the void. The mission begins with the Protoss slowly being damaged by the nearby shadows and being told to purge the corruption. After destroying the corruption, Tassadar appears and tells you he needs to be freed from N'Erud. N'Erud explains that after death the Xel'naga return to the void. Then you're given a base and told to defeat N'Erud while protecting your allies. However, Void Thrashers keep attacking you. Also, there's 4 sites where your allies can establish additional bases if you clear them. Once you get to N'Erud, you find that he can't move, so you can keep attacking him until he's defeated. Then Stukov kills him. Next, Tassadar reveals he isn't Tassadar. He's a Xel'naga called Ouros. Also, that the Xel'naga look like the Leviathan. He then explains that he created the prophecies, and that Amon has become one with the void. Thus, in order to maintain the infinite cycle, Kerrigan has to become a Xel'naga, as only a Xel'naga can defeat Amon. Kerrigan then regrets everything she did in Heart of the Swarm, despite showing no such remorse throughout that game, and agrees. The Essence of Eternity. The cutscene starts with Ouros giving Kerrigan more power, which gives her a beam attack. Next, you play as the Terrans and have to protect Kerrigan until she transforms, just like in the Crucible. Though the Protoss and Zerg are helping you, you won't lose if their bases are destroyed. Throughout the mission, Amon will summon Void Thrashers to attack Kerrigan. They can either be destroyed with your armies or using Kerrigan. However, if you use Kerrigan's power, the transfer will take longer to complete. Also, Amon mocks you with his new character portrait. Once the transference is complete, Kerrigan gives the swarm to Zagara, Ouros dies, and Kerrigan becomes a giant glowing fire fairy, rather than looking like every other Xel'naga. Kerrigan and Reyna then share a dream kiss, so their romantic subplot can be shoved into these missions. Amon's Fall. The mission begins with the title spoiling the ending. Next, Kerrigan heads to Amon and explains that Amon is invincible due to his void crystals. Fortunately, these crystals have to leave him every few minutes to recharge, and they're vulnerable while this happens. Once you gain control of the Zerg, Kerrigan explains that the void crystals will conveniently move over the terrain near all 3 bases so you can attack them. Fortunately, they are also very large and slow moving, which makes them very easy to attack, especially with flying units. Partway through the mission, Amon attacks and destroys one of Reyna's command centers. Then goes back to doing nothing while the 3 nearby armies continue to attack his void crystals. Amon then destroys one of Artanis' Nexi and Kerrigan's hatcheries. Throughout the mission, he continues to destroy these 3 buildings until none remain. After 7 void crystals have been destroyed, the barrier falls. Kerrigan says she is somehow choosing freedom, and beats Amon in 1 hit. 2 years later, Reyna is in the same bar he was in at the start of Wings of Liberty. Then Kerrigan appears and he leaves. The end credits then explain what everyone is doing. Conclusion. While these last 3 missions do help make some of the earlier missions less confusing, they also create a lot of issues. I'll start with the positives. I like how in The Essence of Eternity, Kerrigan was given a super powerful beam that was balanced by having the mission take longer every time it was used. This mechanic gave the player the choice of being able to quickly defeat powerful enemies, while creating bigger armies, at the cost of having to endure the end rush for longer. Amon being protected by void crystals in Amon's Fall does explain why he tried to protect his body the same way in the host using void shards. While I'm not saying either defense were good, I do appreciate the consistency. And now the negatives. The most obvious one is, how is Amon going to return? Both Nerud and Amon are now dead, so there isn't anyone who knows how to resurrect them. Even if there was someone who knew how to resurrect them, the artifact is gone, so there isn't any way to de-infest Psychic Zerg to obtain the psychic energy needed. There aren't any Xel'naga who can build a new artifact. There aren't any hybrids left to collect the energy needed, and there aren't any facilities that can make more hybrids. Thus, Amon has no way of returning from the void and can be safely ignored. However, since Blizzard wanted an ending where 3 factions unite against the big bad, just like in Warcraft 3, everyone has to go into the void to fight Amon. The next issue, which affects all the missions, is that not only are you unable to choose which versions of each unit and upgrades you want for each of the factions, but the AI will never use any of the special abilities available. Thus, you can only use the Spear of Adun's abilities, such as Shield Overcharge, in Into the Void, with the AI-controlled Protoss not using them in any other mission. This is disappointing, as the choices the players made throughout their playthroughs are ignored in favour of what Blizzard wants the players to have. The next set of problems are related to the mission Into the Void. The first issue is why in Echoes of the Future did Ouros pretend to be Tassadar, claim his prophecies were the Overmind's vision, then pretend to be the Overmind during the intro of In Utter Darkness. Ouros says he becomes Tassadar to inspire Zeratul, but he never explains why he needed to pretend to be the Overmind. The most likely reason is that the writers either forgot what they wrote, or are trying to retcon it. In either case, it's bad writing. The second one is what happened to the other unnamed Xel'naga. Rohanna mentioned that the other Xel'naga attacked Amon, his Zerg and most likely Nerud, which resulted in all the Xel'naga except Nerud dying. So, once in the void, Amon must have somehow killed all the other Xel'naga without the help of Nerud and the Zerg. Afterwards, Amon was reborn, killed the remaining Xel'naga at Ulnar, then either had Nerud kill those Xel'naga a second time, or killed them himself shortly after he died. If Amon is so powerful, then how did he lose to the Xel'naga when he had his Zerg armies assisting him? If the other Xel'naga are so strong, then how did they lose to Amon in the void? It's clear that the writers didn't put any thought into what happened to the other Xel'naga, and are trying to hand-wave the issue by claiming that they all died somehow, even when they should have been able to beat Amon a second time. The third one is, why did Amon bind Ouros instead of killing him? Amon killed all the other Xel'naga without a problem, and if he was worried about Ouros' power, he could have attacked Ouros with Nerud. The answer is because the writers wanted a Xel'naga to help the player, so they just added one even though it didn't fit with the scenario they created, and resulted in the plot making no sense. The fourth is, why does a Xel'naga have to defeat Amon? Zukov killed Nerud even though he's not a Xel'naga. I suspect the writers added this so Kerrigan could become even more special than she already is. The fifth is that the correct combination of races is Terran and Zerg, in a game focusing on the Protoss. While this may have been foreshadowed in the Infinite Cycle, as one of the constructs only attacks Kerrigan, this doesn't change the fact that it comes across as yet another way that the developers condemn the Protoss in a game full of condemnation of them. It also contradicts several instances in Starcraft 1 where the Protoss was stated to possess the purity of form. The final is that Kerrigan says she regrets what she did in the previous game, doesn't change the fact that she murdered billions in her quest for revenge. I suspect this is an attempt to try to retcon Kerrigan by making her seem more sympathetic. As a result, the Xel'naga died because the writers didn't know what to do with them, while Kerrigan gets to drive the plot in a third game because the writers like her. Yet more examples of bad writing in this game. Regarding the Essence of Eternity, my only issue is that after Kerrigan becomes a Xel'naga, why does she look like a giant fire fairy instead of a Leviathan? I suspect the reason is because these sell merchandise, while these do not. Though if the writers had provided a reason why Kerrigan didn't look like every other Xel'naga, it would have come off as something other than pandering to the fans. Finally, we have Amon's fall. Leaving aside how contrived it is that he has to send his magic crystals away from himself every few minutes to maintain his magical barrier, the first issue is why does he send his void crystals anywhere near his enemies' bases? There's an uninhabited corner in the northeast area of the map where he could send them. He could also use his powers to build up huge defences in one part of the map and only send his crystals there. It seems that the developers wanted to make this battle with magic crystals easy to win, so they made Amon act like an idiot by constantly sending his only weak point near his enemies. The second issue is why does Amon just sit around while his void crystals are slowly destroyed? He's clearly capable of attacking, so he could attack bases more frequently, or destroy the ground where his void crystals are going to travel, so they won't be vulnerable for so long. Instead, he does neither because if he fought effectively, the player would lose, so the developers had to make him inept. The third issue is that once again Amon is defeated in one hit. Since Kerrigan can't even destroy Amon's void crystals in one hit, this must mean he is incredibly weak, which makes no sense since he's supposed to have killed the other Xel'naga, despite being outnumbered by them. This is even more disappointing than his death in the Host, as in that mission he was only able to fight for a short amount of time before being hit by a huge bombardment from multiple spaceships, rather than choosing not to fight for the entire battle despite being at full power, then dying after being hit by a fairy beam without even trying to fight back. Also, this beam only does 1,000 damage, which would mean Amon only has a fraction of the HP Nerude had. Even Archimond in Warcraft 3 was more effective since he actively attacked the player in the last 30 seconds and was almost impossible to beat in combat. As a result, Amon's fall should have been an epic battle against an evil god, but since Blizzard nerfed Amon to the point that he just sat around waiting to die, this victory feels hollow. Even the fight against Nerude in Into the Void was more challenging, and the cutscene battle against Nerude in Heart of the Swarm was more interesting. Regarding characters, this whole area was a mess, with characters appearing and disappearing, because the writers had no idea what to do with them. Xel'naga appears in the intro because the writers wanted someone to criticize Kerrigan, then disappears because the writers don't need her anymore. Stukov appears in Echoes of the Future to get revenge against Nerude, then vanishes because the plot doesn't need him anymore. Zagar appears in Essence of Eternity to be given control of the Swarm, then is absent from Amon's fall because Kerrigan needs to control the Swarm. Yet more examples of bad writing as the writers simply remove characters without any explanation when they were no longer needed, rather than providing an explanation for why they were absent. Regarding the characters that appear in all 3 missions, Artanis contributes the least because he's not the one the writers care about. Instead, the focus is on concluding the Reyna-Kerrigan relationship because shoving it into 2 games wasn't enough for the writers. While the players meant to care that Kerrigan and Reyna won't be together, since this relationship was barely covered in the previous games, Reyna and Kerrigan don't even share a mission until the epilogue, and their relationship seems to mainly be some romantic comments by Reyna, and Kerrigan and Reyna dream kiss, it's impossible to be invested in it. In conclusion, the epilogue wasn't about ending the Protoss' story, it was about ending Kerrigan's story, and a romance the writers had already wasted 2 games on. Thus the writers retconned Tassadar into the Xel'naga Ouros, to explain why the Overmind's vision from In Utter Darkness bore no resemblance to what happened in Legacy of the Void, and so they could make Kerrigan into the saviour they tried and failed to make her into throughout 3 games. While this ending would have worked if this was the Zerg campaign, as this was the Protoss campaign, these missions are a terrible end to Legacy of the Void.